Hey guys, thank you for joining me on Their Fight Story. I have Michael Parente with us. Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you for asking. How did you get into martial arts?
Whew. Well, so my whole journey into, yeah, it's such a long story, but my whole journey to combat sports really started about 12 years ago. For people that know what I do, I'm involved with CES MMA and CES boxing, which is owned by Jimmy Birchfield Sr. Jimmy's been around the business for more than 3 decades. Jimmy, what a lot of people don't know, is actually my godfather. And Jimmy is my grandfather's cousin through marriage. So on that, so we've always been related, right? It's part of the family. In fact, when I was a kid, up until I was about 5 years old, we actually lived in the house that was on the street behind him. Our yards were connected. There was no fence. We just had one big backyard between the two houses. And so I basically grew up with the Birchfields, and it's just always been, I've always been involved to some degree. I'd come to the fights when I was younger. I always liked to just sort of see what he would do. And I even worked in his restaurant when I was 16 years old, under the table, of course. I wasn't able to actually work at the time, but I worked in his restaurant, in his kitchen for 1 week when I was a kid, and didn't make it that far. But he was always a part of my life, always gave me some opportunities. So to fast forward, in 2008, I was actually still in the journalism business at the time, which is what I went to school for. And I had actually landed like what I considered my dream job. I got to work for the New England Patriots. Even though I wasn't a fan of the team, I was working in the NFL. I worked for it's their now defunct newspaper, Patriots Football Weekly, which they actually ceased publication 2 years ago. With everything going digital, they no longer publish an actual paper. But back in 2008, it was thriving. So I get this job with the Patriots. I work for the organization. I have an office in Gillette Stadium. Everything's great. But 2008 was when the economy really started to crash. So I would say I got hired in August of 2008. And by November, I was laid off. So imagine getting this great job. And I had left the newspaper industry because newspapers were dying. And here I am thinking, hey, great. You got out of newspapers. You're now with the NFL. Nothing can go wrong. Well, it went wrong in November. Unfortunately, I was part of a mass layoffs at the stadium, and it's kind of parallel to what's happening now. As you know, a lot of companies are laying off a lot of employees during the COVID-19 pandemic. So I kind of get some flashbacks to that, and I see people that I know, losing their jobs. But so back then, I get laid off, and how old was I then? 29, I'm 41 now. So I'm 29 years old. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm kind of panicking. So a couple of days later, I go see Uncle Jimmy. I walk into the office at CES and say, listen, I've been laid off from my job. I got some time in my hands. I'm a writer. If you need some help with your website, I'd be glad to do it. I'll just come to the events. I'll come to press conferences, whatever. I'll do some features on the fighters. I like writing feature stories, what I do. So that's what I started doing, and I covered it through the first events. And then, as things went on, I had time on my hands, so I wasn't working really. As time went on, I just started doing more and more with the company. And the one thing about Jimmy Birchfield, I tell this to everybody, is that, he's an interesting character, right? He's like the stereotypical old school boxing promoter. He's got the cigar in his mouth. He's got the look, the raspy voice, all those things. But deep down, if Jimmy believes in you, he is going to give you countless opportunities to prove yourself. And he was someone who believed in me at a time where I didn't really know where I was going to go next. I didn't really know what I was going to do beyond that. So he would keep giving me more responsibility. I went from being just the guy doing some stories for the website to becoming his full-time publicist. And at first I'm like, wow, okay, this is a big responsibility. Now I'm responsible for contacting all major news outlets, local, national, with fight information. I'm the guy now. And then again, as time goes on, I took a small interest in graphic design, and then suddenly I was designing all the artwork for boxing and a little bit for MMA. And then again, time goes on. 5 years later, 2013, he asked me to be his boxing matchmaker. I'm like, there's no way I can do this. Like, I have no experience. I don't know the people in the game. I have to negotiate purses. Like, I'm not a negotiator. I didn't get into business. Like, what am I doing here? But he's like, no, you're going to do this. I'm going to teach you how to do this. And you're just going to do it. And, he forced me, and to this day, he still does it. And at times I'm like, why is he making me do this? But he's always made me operate outside of my comfort zone. You know what I mean? Like, you put me in a situation, I'd be a little bit uncomfortable, but I would learn,
Mhm.
I would learn on the job. And I'm so thankful for that because, it's been now 3 years. I now work for the Community College of Rhode Island in Warwick, Rhode Island. I'm the public relations officer for the college with all the college communications. And that was a big departure for me too from sports. I've always been involved in sports. I wrote about basketball, football, boxing, MMA. That's easy. Like I know sports. But 3 years ago when this job came up and I was still just working for CS at the time, I thought, I'm going to have to, again, step outside of my comfort zone. I'm going to have to write about education and, policies on college campuses. Like, what am I doing? I didn't go to school for that. I'm just some, idiot who writes about sports. But having been in these positions where CES forced me to adapt and forced me to do things I wasn't always comfortable doing, I took on this role and I, for once, believed that I could do it and I can do it and I'm doing it. And it's a great feeling to have. And so that's the big thing, CES, I just kind of got into it on a whim, it's the perfect example of, one door closes and another door opens, and this door opened for me. And to be honest, it can be frustrating at times working in combat sports, but it's always led me to bigger opportunities. And a lot of that's because of Jimmy and just the confidence and the faith he's always shown in me.
So you're just doing the matchmaking for boxing?
I do the matchmaking for boxing. Patrick Sullivan is the MMA matchmaker. And that's a role that I've had, I would say, on and off for about 7 years. There was a time where I had to step away from it for my own, mental health and well-being, because it's very stressful. You feel like there's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders to make the show run. The fighters depend on you to get them the right matchup. And the worst thing that can happen, you make a fight and then the opponent breaks his hand 6 days out, and you've got this fighter who's put, God, 3 months of training, running around, selling tickets, getting medicals done, training, cutting weight, all those things. And it's your personal responsibility to fix it and get him his opportunity. And it can be very stressful and demanding. And there was a time in 2013 when I first started doing it where I was not happy. Personally, I really had some issues just dealing with it and with the stress related to it. I stepped away for a little while. A year later, I got married. And when I came back, coincidentally, from my wedding, the next matchmaker after me had stepped away. And Jimmy came to me and says, listen, I need your help. Just this one event. Just this one event. And that one event's now turned into, re-upping for another 6 years of making fights. But, I think what I learned to do, though, to be honest with you, was just to handle it better. At the end of the day, and Pat and I talk nonstop about matchmaking because he's someone, it's a real niche profession. Like there aren't, you don't go to school for it. There's no college degree for matchmaking. It's just something you learn. And there aren't that many people who do this actively, day in, day out. So there's so few people you can talk to, and whether you're venting or just bouncing ideas off of. But I talked to Pat a lot about it, and we just kind of thought to ourselves, the worst thing that happens is you fail. You fail, but you pick yourself up and you get back to it the next event and you learn from it. And it doesn't have to be something that breaks you down mentally because you've let somebody down or you feel you've let somebody down. You just have to learn to process it better. And I've learned to do that over the years. And it's become, now I wouldn't say it's less stressful. It's just on how I handle the stress. It's still very stressful and a lot of things still go wrong. Nothing's evolved in 7 years where fighters don't back out of fights or guys don't get hurt or things don't happen. I mean, we've had events canceled. I mean, we had an event canceled the day of in March 12th, which was supposed to be our last boxing event, canceled due to the COVID outbreak. And, we had fighters in town in hotel rooms waiting to go to the arena that night who were basically told they're not fighting. I mean, we've dealt with every nightmare and disaster you can imagine, but it's really not I don't think it's about limiting the problems. It's just about handling them better. And that's the one thing I've learned to do in 7 years that can help me breathe a little bit easier when I'm kind of up against it.
Wow. I knew it was stressful. I didn't realize how intense.
I mean, it's crazy. Like things, you can ask Pat Sullivan the same thing. We've had fights that have fallen through the day before a weigh-in. What do you do? I mean, can you get somebody on a plane in time? Do they have all the proper medical paperwork? Are they on weight? And now the opponent's a little bit iffy. They don't want to take a big risk against somebody they don't know. And it's nonstop. And the worst thing about it, it's tough to do this when you have a family. And that was another thing that I had to do is after I got married in 2014, and now I have 2 children, the first who was born in 2016. So I've been a father for 4 years now. is learn to just find the time to do it, but knowing when to just walk away for a bit and prioritize the things that really matter. And you cannot let it consume you, because it can. I mean, it's Jimmy always says, there's no punching in or punching out of this business. It's not a 9 to 5. You get calls at all hours of the night. I used to get calls, 10 o'clock at night, fighter checked into his hotel, the front desk, and the room's not there. And what do you do now? And it's like, it's sort of one emergency after the other. But again, you just have to kind of learn how to handle it. And if you can just sort of like breathe a second and exhale, you can do fine with this, but it's a challenge. And it is definitely a job that you learn on the job. There's no manual for this sort of thing. You don't go to school for it. You just start doing it. And the worst part is you do learn the hard way at times. You deal with people who might not be as reliable as you thought they were. You kind of always have to have your guard up and be on the defensive, which, isn't always the most pleasant way to live life. But in this business, it kind of forces you to do that. And you just have to be able to separate it.
It's a lot. You're doing a great job.
I take I take pride in it. Like I don't. If we have a card and the card doesn't turn out to be as good as I thought it would be, it will bother me for a couple of days. Like I'll talk about it the next morning, and I'll think about it all weekend after a Friday night event, and could have gotten a better opponent for this fighter. This fight could have turned out better. And I've had friends of mine that work with this company tell me that you're your own worst critic at times, and you just got to sort of deal with it. Things happen. I mean, you could put the best looking fight on paper, 10-0 versus 10-0, right? It's the perfect matchup. It could end in one punch in the first round. Liver shot and the guy's out. And did you do a terrible job matching the fight, or did the fight just turn out the way it turned out? Sometimes you have to pick and you have to sort of just look at it from a different scope. And the sport's hard, right? There's this balance between like Pat and I have this ongoing thing about we want to make the best fights possible. Like I wish every event looked like a showbox event where it's top prospect versus top prospect. But the reality at the regional level is that it's just not always going to be the case, because the regional level is where fighters build themselves and they take step-by-step approach to challenging themselves in the ring or the cage. When you start out your pro career, you get a couple of soft touches early on, then you step up accordingly, and by the time you're 10-0 or 11-0, you're seasoned enough to the point where you're ready to take on the next challenge. Me, I want to throw everybody in the ring against, killers and make these fantasy matchups, right? Because I look at it like a fan. That's kind of like the fault that I have sometimes. Is, well, if I'm a fan, would I go to this event? Would I pay, $50, $65 to see this? And if the answer is no, then I put it upon myself to make a better card. But again, you have to understand the dynamic of the regional game. One thing that's benefited us is the deal that we have with UFC Fight Pass, both in MMA and boxing, where it kind of forces you to put on some better fights, and it has forced some fighters to step up the level of competition, maybe perhaps a little sooner than they've expected. Because if you want to get on that platform, if you want to be on a platform where thousands to millions of UFC fight fans could be logging in that night, and on a whim, they just click on your event and they see you in action, you want to put your best foot forward. And you want to be in there against somebody that I think takes the sport as seriously as you do. That's one of the things I always tell a fighter is, you have to challenge yourself at times, right? You want to go in there with someone who's taking this as seriously as you are, because if you're putting in 5-6 weeks of cutting weight, selling tickets, running around, getting EKGs and eye exams done, posting on social media, going to press conferences, signing photos, whatever, photo ops, media opportunities, you don't want to fight a guy that just doesn't care. You don't want to fight someone that if he gets an ingrown hair, he's going to back out of the fight, because it's doing a disservice to yourself and your fans. And so that's something we sort of preach to the fighters. But yeah, I mean, I wish every card could be perfect. I think over the years, I've learned the biggest thing is just to build my database of people that I can trust in this sport. Because boxing's a very shady game, and there's definitely some element of that in mixed martial arts as well. It's like those, the movies you see, like Rocky V. They had the actor who played the unscrupulous promoter. But there are people like that in this sport more than you think. Like, it's real. There are people that will take advantage of it. There are people that will lie. They will sort of misrepresent their role in a fighter's career. They'll tell you, I've got access to this guy, and he really doesn't. And you sort of get dragged down this path, and things fall apart. You have to know who you can trust. And the biggest thing is over the last 7 years is sort of building my contact database, where now I know who to go to. If I got to get this fight done and it's a big important fight, I'm going to this person, that person, or that person, because I know those people will come through. And that's how you make better fight cards in the end. It's just always kind of keeping your guard up and knowing who you can really deal with, who is dependable, and who's going to come through in the end.
Now, I've always respected CES. I've always thought it was one of the top promotions in the area. Why should a fighter want to fight for CES?
Well, there are a lot of things that CS offers that I think other promotions don't.
Hmm.
Now, a fighter can go to Golden Boy promotions, a fighter can go to Top Rank, and even promotions where they're offering you this signing bonus, right? I get this 10, 15 grand up front. I no knock on the bigger promotions, but I do sometimes feel like with the bigger promoters, the low level fighters are not a priority. You know, they're just not given that same treatment. They're not given
Hmm.
that same level of respect. Jimmy puts it as tender loving care. You know, that's what he puts into every fighter. Whether you're Peter Manfredo Jr. and you're, the king of Province, right? The pride of Province, the most popular fighter of this era in Rhode Island, or you are a pro debut with 15 amateur fights, Jimmy is going to give you the same dedication to building your career as you would with anybody. And that's true. I've seen it. Jimmy still to this day gets excited. I've seen him have people in the office, and me personally, I would just get like so beat down by this all the time of hearing everybody's story about how they're all going to be world champions, right? But Jimmy legitimately has everybody come in. He sits down with, and he says, "Bring whoever's important to you. It could be your fiance, it could be your wife, cousin, whatever, your father. Bring him in. We're going to sit down and talk." And Jimmy gets them fired up. Why should we sign you? I want to be a world champion. And Jimmy's eyes light up. He gets so he's been doing this for 30 years, and he's as excited now as he was 30 years ago when he promoted Ray Oliveira.
Hmm.
Because he just has that passion for it. And that's what you want as a fighter. You want someone who's going to fight as hard for you as he would fight for anybody. Sometimes even harder than you would advocate for your own self. Because that's what Jimmy does. Jimmy will work tirelessly, on the phone with sanctioning bodies, on the phone with every major network to get you that opportunity. Jimmy's done so much for so many fighters. I look at a guy like Hank Lundy, from Philadelphia. We promoted Hank for really 95 to 98% of his career. And even without having a major network TV deal, we've never had to deal with HBO, we've never had to deal with Showtime. Hank Lundy's fought on the big stage dozens of times, fought Terrence Crawford for the world title on HBO at Madison Square Garden. And that's Jimmy Birchfield from Providence, Rhode Island, bringing him to that top of the mountain,
Hmm.
right? Not a lot of guys can do that. Yeah, Top Rank can do it. Top Rank's got a 5-year deal with ESPN. They can get you on that platform, but are they going to put as much into your career? After one loss, where are they going to be?
Hmm.
Think about the number of fighters who sign these multi-year deals with these big promoters. They lose one fight and the party's over, right? Turn the lights out, they close the door, they forget about you.
Hmm.
Jimmy has given so many opportunities to fighters. If you lose, you don't get cut. You figure out what went wrong. We work harder. Jimmy will work, and he'll get you a dietitian if he thinks that you need to change a diet. He'll get you the right training. He'll get you the right sparring. He'll call around and he'll find fight camps that are flying in opponents, for sparring purposes. He'll get you the right help you need. And that's the biggest thing about it. And that's one thing. That's just one
Hmm.
small thing. But having the promoter in your corner who's been doing this for years, he treats fighters like they're his own children. I mean,
Hmm.
people have called Jimmy a father figure. They call him Uncle Jimmy like I do, and we're
Hmm.
not all related. He's not an uncle to everybody, but he's like an uncle. He just has that presence. And the second thing is the platform. It's whether it was MMA with Access TV years
Hmm.
ago, we had that opportunity to get so many fighters to the UFC through our own avenue, right? You put guys on. Think of the guys who've gone to that next level. Rob
Hmm.
Font, Calvin Kattar right now, who's dominating at the UFC. Mike Rodriguez, who's made the step up. John Doomsday Howard came back after being released from the UFC, and within 6 fights was back thanks to the CES platform giving him opportunity after opportunity. I know I'm missing some other guys. Charles Rosa, another example of a fighter, again, from the CES cage to the UFC cage. We have been that pipeline for years, and now it's even closer because we're on UFC Fight Pass, right in front of the right eyes every
Hmm.
time we fight. And now boxing has been given that opportunity. Jermaine Ortiz, who is our
Hmm.
top prospect, who's going to be fighting in November, just recently fought on Fight Pass in February, where he defended his WBC youth lightweight title. Irvin Gonzalez fought on Fight Pass just 2 fights after signing with CES, and there he is back on Fight Pass fighting for the WBC youth featherweight world title, which he won with a 4th-round knockout. So it's the opportunities. Jimmy's relationships with the sanctioning bodies have given our fighters countless opportunities to fight for
Hmm.
those titles. And while they may not be world titles, they put you in the conversation. right? And then you have the platform, because everything's streaming now. It's not just network television, but the streaming platforms have been so big. To have the UFC Fight Pass platform, we're going to be on that channel, that streaming service 5 to 6 times a year. It's invaluable for a fighter. So yeah, absolutely. Come join the CS parade. We're going to put the time and the effort into your career. We get you the right opportunities in front of the right people, which is the biggest thing.
And how can a fighter be considered to fight for CES?
Well, I think it's simple. You know, it's do you want to win? Do you want to be a world champion? You know, we want fighters who are serious about their careers. You know, not everybody knows right away, and you know, we understand that. Some fighters, they first come up, you know, they still have to work, right? You're not gonna get a multi-million-dollar deal and, you know, a 6-figure Showtime payday 3 months in your career. So a lot of these fighters, I think, really relate to the common person. You know, a laborer who works 40 hours a week, or even someone who works, you know, in the education field, right? Anywhere. The fighters have to work in addition to train, put time aside at night, sometimes take time away from their families to do this. But at the end of the day, we want to know if this is something you are serious about, that we're going to work hard to get you there. It's not for people who want to treat this as a hobby. You know, we want, because if we're going to put you out there, you know, and we have limited opportunities in Fight Pass. So we have a number of cards, but we may only have 4 slots where you're going to be streaming on the network. You know, why do you belong on that spot? Are you serious about this? Are you fighting the right competition? You know, we don't want someone who, you know, 20 fights into his or her pro career isn't ready to step up to the next level. We just want that eagerness. And the biggest thing is when Jimmy sits you down, he will ask you, what do you want out of boxing or MMA? And the right answer is, I want to be a world champion. And if you have that passion and are willing to do it, and again, like I said, Jimmy will get you there a number of ways. You know, Jimmy has worked out deals where he has helped fighters sign with managers, right? Managers who will take a fighter, pay him a stipend to train. This way the fighter doesn't have to work 40 hours a week and can put more into his craft. You know, it's a slow step-by-step process, but if you show you are serious about this, if you know how to promote yourself on social media, which is one of the biggest things, right? It's not just about showing up and fighting. You know, can you build a fan base? Can you put people in the seats? Because your ability to market yourself is what's going to get you to that platform. When you go on UFC Fight Pass and we put you on UFC Fight Pass, we want to do so in front of a full arena. Now, I know right now, COVID, it's a different ballgame. I'm talking like normal times. You don't want to put on a fighter that can't draw. So you got to show that commitment. Can you market yourself? Do you have the personality to do this? Do you have the personality to bring fans to that arena? So when you fight on UFC Fight Pass, there are 5,000-6,000 people screaming your name as you walk to the cage of the ring. That's the kind of dedication and passion we want to see. And, you know, it's evident early on. I mean, we noticed it. You know, I've worked with fighters, and Jimmy would say the same thing, who, you know, they may not have the most talent. You know, they're not blue chip prospects. They didn't have 200 amateur fights. They weren't in the U.S. Olympic trials, but they work hard at it. And that's the thing. You know, it's not just about signing the most talented fighter, because sometimes the most talented fighter is not a big draw. Sometimes the most talented fighter won't maximize his or her ability because they don't put the work in. So it's really a combination of work and talent. But I always feel like the work is just so much more paramount, because I think you can always fix things along the way. You know, you may not turn from, you know, club fighter to world champion, but you can improve. And if you just show the work and you show the effort, I think sky's the limit, and CS would always be willing to work with fighters like that.
Now, when is your next show?
Next Wednesday. So we're finally back in business. CES MMA 61. It's going to be a new venue, a new look for us. So 1 week from today, we're actually going to be right next door to where I work, coincidentally, the Crown Plaza Hotel in Warwick. We're going to be outdoors under the tent. So the Crown Plaza has a big tent they use for functions, banquets, weddings, any event that can be held outdoors, kind of in an insulated area. So this is our first event since January for mixed martial arts. So you're talking 9 months. And it was something that we put together working with the state of Rhode Island, all the proper safety protocols in place, COVID-19 testing, social distancing guidelines, every protocol to ensure fighter, staff, and personnel safety has been taken for this event. So we're very excited to bring it to the fans. There will not be fans in attendance live. That has not been work out yet. We haven't gotten to that stage where we're, comfortable doing it and ready to do it. So it's going to be basically a closed event. It will be on UFC Fight Pass live.
Okay.
I'll be doing the play-by-play with Joe Lozon. Multiple. I can't lose count of how many times Joe Lozon's fought in UFC. I think it's like more than 20 times now. He's a UFC lifer, and Joe's great. We did a show in January. I believe it was Joe, myself, and Tom Lawler. It's just magic in the broadcast booth. So I'm looking forward to working with Joe again. We've got John Guy III headlining in his biggest fight against Nick Alley. Mitch Raposo from Cage Sightings makes his CS debut. Fabio Chiron's back. Chris Matino's back in the cage. Right now, 5, maybe 6 fights. So, it's a small step in the right direction. It's an opportunity. We've been working with the state for a long time. It's been months working on a plan to put in place. And the biggest thing, the number one thing is safety. We want the fighters to be safe. We don't want any, we're working to slow the spread of COVID just like everybody else. So we're trying to do this as safe as possible for, fighters, staff, personnel, everybody involved. And it took some time. It's not just something we put together like this. This has been months and months in the making. And it's great to finally have it back and have this opportunity, because a lot of fighters have been out of action for a while. They're itching to get back in there. And, if you're someone who is trying to make a career out of this, these are tough times. It's hard to sit out for 8 months and only really have some training, in your basement or at home or in a small gym to really hone your craft. You need to get in there and face live action. So for these fighters, they'll get that opportunity. And we're on the verge of announcing something very big for boxing as well coming up soon. So I can't really give you all the details on that just yet, but we're in the works for that as well. So, MMA, boxing, 99.9% sure we'll have both back before the end of the calendar year. And then fingers crossed, hopefully 2021 is a lot different than 2020. I'm sure everybody feels the same way, right? On a personal, professional level. And hopefully there's some sense of normalcy going forward. We don't know what it's going to look like. I mean, you look right now, the NFL is playing in front of empty stadiums, and even the NFL is still having problems with COVID. So, nothing's a guarantee. But what we can guarantee is that any event we run will be run with every proper social protocol, safety protocol in place. So we've taken all those necessary measures, and we're excited to get back out there.
The fighters that are going to be fighting, they're just professionals, or are you going to be having amateurs?
Just pros for this card. If we do go to different venues in other states, we will explore the possibility of amateur fights. Right now it's tough, and a lot of promoters are going through this, and I've seen it. If you notice in boxing right now, there actually has been a lot of boxing. There's been a lot of UFC, but those promotions have multi-million-dollar or at least lucrative television deals where they can do this without fans. When you're a regional promoter like CS, so much of your revenue stream comes from ticket sales and sponsors. It's your lifeline. So it's very hard to do this without selling tickets, but there's a balance between when do we go back and get our fighters back in action and give them those opportunities to when we can actually start to really maximize the possibilities from a financial standpoint. It's very hard to do. So, right now, if we're able to do amateurs, that's something from a business standpoint that helps offset costs for fights. A lot of promoters do it. You've seen it at the regional level. You'll see, 4 pro fights and like 20 amateur fights. It's a crazy imbalance, but it's because of the costs involved, right? It's very tough to do that. And right now, this is such a different platform and format that we don't really know where it's going to go yet and how it's going to work out. But we're going to roll the dice and do it. And I love the amateur side of it too, because it's kind of like an interesting pipeline. Like we've had pro-ams in boxing I can speak to in the past at Foxwoods Casino. And some of the fighters who fought on those amateur cards, 5-6 years later are fighting for CS in the pro ranks. So it's pretty cool to see that. It's like the evolution of a minor league baseball player going to the pros, and it gives fans an opportunity to follow their careers. You may see an amateur that you like, you start to follow them on social media, and in 3-4 years you're going to see them in the cage, or in the ring without the headgear. So it can just be a whole new dynamic, and it really opens up a whole new avenue, a whole new pool of talent, of fighters that are there that are ready to perform in front of fans. And so hopefully we get the chance to do some pro-ams. I like them. I'm a big fan. I'm a big advocate of them. And I think also they can learn from being around the pros and seeing how they do things and how they carry themselves both in and out of the cage or the ring. And I think that's beneficial for them as well. So there's so many good things about it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mike. I know this is a lot, especially for the past 7 months. And finally it's coming together.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just fun to be able to talk about the sport again at some level, not just hypotheticals or dream
yeah.
matchups. Like we're finally doing something again. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention November 28th. Our role in the Mike Tyson Roy Jones fight, the
Yes.
exhibition bout in California. We're working on that event in a consultation role with a company that has promoted the event, and it's a big opportunity. Three of our fighters are going to be on that card. Jermaine Ortiz, Irving Gonzalez, and the heavyweight Giuseppe Cusimano will all have opportunities to fight for WBC titles in that event as well. So it's really cool. So we're able to keep everybody busy in some capacity by spreading it out. And tonight on Showtime, Jimmy Williams from New Haven will be boxing against Brandon Lee, the undefeated welterweight prospect. So we've been keeping busy in different ways. I don't know if fans have been following. We've been releasing podcasts, interviews with boxing and MMA personalities. We've had some throwback events, CES Boxing Classics, which I hosted for a few months. And then also getting fighters on other events where they can fight, because that's been a big thing in boxing. Is the big time TV promoters are running business as usual, and it's creating some really good opportunities for fighters that don't really have another outlet to fight. Jimmy Williams being one of them. So we'll be rooting on Jimmy tonight. Then, of course, October MMA, boxing news coming really soon, and then November 28th in Carson, California. So it's it's finally a full slate again, which is good to see, because there was some real quiet months where I don't think any of us knew what to do ourselves, to be honest.
No, it's great to actually start seeing flyers going out and like, oh my God, it's coming together. It's finally happening, before Christmas. Nice.
Absolutely. It's nice bonus money for the kids, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we conclude?
I would just say, we're thankful for everybody who's really continued to follow us during this time. I know there's a lot of other things to occupy time during the quarantine, but we're glad that our fans have stuck with us during this time and been patient. We're thankful for the fighters who've also been patient, knowing that the opportunities were eventually going to be there. Now they're here again. And so, and the biggest thing is we just want everybody to stay safe, and that's the number one priority. Like I said, we've taken all those safety precautions with the events that we're about to run. We're glad to see that you're safe as well, and and doing well with the podcast. And we're just thankful for everybody that's still a big fan of the sport, that hasn't lost their passion for it despite it being inactive for so long, because that's what really keeps us going. It's all about doing this for fans. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a nice little break, from some of the stress. But I think a lot of us have also been itching to get back into it. And so here we are now finally with that opportunity. So I will see everybody next Wednesday on Fight Pass. I encourage you to log in and join and check out Joe Lozon and I in the booth. And excited to call some fights again, that's for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.